Before we begin, I just want to say that this video discusses a real and deeply tragic case involving the loss of life. My intention is never to cause harm or distress, but to share this story with care, respect, and awareness. Out of respect for those involved and their loved ones, some details may be limited, and I encourage you to watch with that in mind. And if this case feels like it may be too much for you, please feel free to click away and take care of yourself first. For those of you still here, thank you for being here, and with that said, let's begin. To the outside world, they look like the perfect family. A home, two daughters, and another baby on the way. But behind closed doors, something was changing, and when his family suddenly disappeared, he went on camera, begging for them to come home. But what no one realized at the time was that the truth was far darker. This is the story of Chris Watts. Christopher Lee Watts was born on the 16th of May, 1985, which makes him a Taurus, and he was born in Spring Lake, North Carolina to Cindy and Ronnie Watts. He grew up alongside his older sister Jamie in what appeared to be a fairly normal family environment. There is very little publicly known about his early childhood years, but those who knew him described him as a quiet and shy child who often kept to himself. Chris attended local schools in North Carolina and was generally seen as polite, reserved, and academically capable. He was not known as someone who caused trouble or stood out socially. Instead, he blended in easily and tended to avoid conflict. During his teenage years, Chris Watts continued to be described as quiet, introverted, and reserved. He wasn't known for being particularly outgoing or attention-seeking, and many people who knew him later said he often kept his thoughts and emotions to himself. At school, he focused heavily on mechanics and practical subjects, developing a strong interest in cars and engines. This passion eventually shaped the direction of his future career. Unlike many teenagers, Chris was not widely associated with trouble or rebellion. Those around him generally saw him as calm, polite, and easygoing. After finishing school, Chris Watts focused on mechanics and practical work rather than pursuing a university path. Chris was known for being skilled with vehicles and engines, something he had shown an interest in from a young age. His first major jobs were connected to mechanics and automotive work, before later moving into the oil industry where he worked as an operator for Anadarko Petroleum. He wasn't known for having a large social circle, and many later said he often appeared emotionally reserved. Friends and family described him as someone who preferred routine and structure, spending much of his time focused on work, cars, fitness, and everyday life rather than social attention. During these years, he also became increasingly health conscious, later developing a strong interest in exercise and weight loss. In 2010, Chris Watts met Shanann Watts through social media. Shanann was very outgoing and confident. Despite their different personalities, the two quickly connected. Shanann later described Chris as kind, calm, and someone who made her feel safe. Chris, meanwhile, appeared drawn to Shanann's confidence and strong personality. As they spent more time together, their relationship moved quickly. Friends and family said the two seemed genuinely happy in the beginning, often sharing moments of their relationship online and with those close to them. At the time they met, Shanann was already established in her career and had previously built a successful life for herself in North Carolina. Chris, meanwhile, was focused on work and living a much quieter lifestyle. Despite their differences, their relationship continued to grow, and before long they began building a future together. In 2012, Chris and Shanann got married in North Carolina, surrounded by friends and family. Not long after their wedding, the couple moved to Colorado, where they began building what appeared to be a happy family life together. Over the following years, they welcomed two daughters, Bella and Celeste, often known as Cece. Shanann regularly shared family moments online, birthdays, holidays, family trips, and everyday life at home. To many people watching from the outside, they looked like the perfect family. Chris was often seen as a quiet, devoted husband and father, while Shanann was outgoing, organized, and very involved in documenting their life together. Then in 2018, the family announced even more happy news. Shanann was pregnant with their third child, a baby boy they planned to name Nico. From the outside, everything appeared normal, but behind closed doors, the relationship was beginning to change. As time went on, cracks slowly began to appear in the relationship between Chris Watts and Shanann Watts. From the outside, they still appeared to be a happy family, but privately, things were becoming more complicated. Financial pressure, stress, and changes within the relationship began to create tension between them. Around this time, Shanann also noticed that Chris's behavior was beginning to change. He appeared more distant, less emotional, and no longer as engaged in family life as he once had been. Messages later revealed that Shanann was becoming increasingly worried about the state of their marriage, questioning whether Chris still felt the same way about her. And while she was trying to understand what was happening, Chris was already pulling away. On August 13th, 2018, at approximately 1:48 a.m., Shanann returned from a business trip to Arizona and was driven by her friend and colleague Nicole Utoft Atkinson. Over the weekend, Chris had been at home with their daughters. Later that day, Nicole reported Shanann and the girls missing after Shanann failed to attend a scheduled obstetrics and gynecology appointment and did not respond to text messages. When Shanann also missed a business meeting, Nicole went to Chris and Shanann's residence at approximately 12:10 p.m. After repeated knocks and doorbell rings went unanswered, she contacted Chris, who was at work, and notified the Frederick Police Department. A police officer arrived at approximately 1:40 p.m. to conduct a welfare check. Chris granted permission for the officer to search the home, where the family dog was found unharmed, but no trace of Shanann's purse, which contained her keys and medication. Her phone was later found between the couch cushions in the living room. Her car, with the girls' car seats still inside, remained parked in the garage. Shanann's wedding ring was discovered on the bedside table during the search. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the investigation the following day. Chris initially told police that he didn't know where his family might be, and that he had last seen his wife at 5:15 p.m. the previous morning when he left for work. He gave interviews to Denver stations KNG, HTV, and KUSA-TV outside the family home, pleading for the return of his wife and daughters. During one of the interviews, investigators with search dogs could be heard working on the property. After Shanann and the girls were reported missing, Chris gave multiple media interviews asking for his family to return home safely. At the time, he appeared calm and composed, but many people later revisited those interviews after learning the truth. This became one of the most talked about parts of the case. Chris and Nicole Kessinger met whilst working together at Anadarko Petroleum. The relationship began in early summer of 2018 and became serious, with the pair seeing each other 4 to 5 times a week, particularly during July while Shanann was visiting family in North Carolina. Chris's behavior started to change. He appeared more withdrawn, less connected to family life, and increasingly focused on the new relationship. Shanann was left confused and hurt by the sudden shift in his behavior. Messages later revealed that she sensed something was wrong and was desperately trying to save the marriage. Nicole believed that Chris was in his final stages of divorce and was not aware he was still married or that his wife was pregnant until the news broke of his family's disappearance. When Nicole realized that Chris had lied to her, she felt disgusted and broke off all communication, as she did not believe in ruining a marriage. But behind closed doors, Chris was already imagining a different future, one without the life he had built. Nicole voluntarily went to the police after Shanann and the children were reported missing, disclosing the affair and providing over 3 hours of interviews to authorities. She assisted the investigation by detailing her last text exchanges with Chris, in which she pressured him to tell the truth about his family's whereabouts. Law enforcement never listed Nicole as a suspect or accomplice, accepting her testimony that she was unaware of Chris's plans. Following the conviction and high media coverage, Nicole feared for the safety, stayed out of the public eye, and reportedly went into hiding, possibly utilizing an alias to avoid public backlash. As of February 2026, it is reported that she had successfully disappeared from public view to move on from the ordeal. Chris Watts told a pen pal in 2026 report that the affair was very sexual, very twisted, very mixed up, and that he blamed it for motivating him to destroy his family. On August 15th, 2018, the FBI joined the search for Shanann and her daughters. Chris was administered a polygraph examination, which he failed. He then confessed, first to his father, Ronnie, and subsequently to investigators, that he had killed Shanann, though he falsely claimed that he did so only after witnessing her smother their daughters. Chris alleged that he discovered Bella's body and that, upon finding Shanann strangling Celeste, he strangled Shanann in a rage before transporting all three bodies to an Anadarko petroleum oil site where he was employed. He was arrested that day. Chris marked the locations of the bodies on a photograph of the oil field for investigators, who arrived at the site at approximately 11 p.m. The bodies of Bella and Celeste, who had been smothered by Chris with his bare hands, were recovered from separate crude oil storage tanks, while Shanann was found buried in a shallow grave nearby. Each child's body had been pushed through a hatch at the top of a different tank, with the opening measuring 8 inches, 20 centimeters in diameter. According to the medical examiner, Bella had scratches on her left buttock from being shoved through this hole. A tuft of blonde hair was found on the edge of one of these hatches. On August 21st, prosecutors charged Chris with 3 counts of first-degree murder, including an additional count for each child, under a provision covering the death of a child under 12 by a person in a position of trust. He was also charged with unlawful termination of a pregnancy and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. Anadarko terminated his employment on the day of his arrest. Chris was denied bail at his initial court appearance. On November 29th, Colorado authorities released surveillance footage recorded in the early morning hours of August 13th by a neighbor's security camera. The video showed Chris loading a gas can into the bed of his pickup truck and then backing the vehicle into his garage. Investigators concluded that he was transporting the bodies of his wife and daughters to the remote oil site where they were later found. The footage, captured shortly after Shanann returned home from her business trip, demonstrated that she did not leave the house with the children that morning, contradicting Chris's initial statements to police. Chris pleaded guilty to the murders on November 6th. The district attorney of Weld County did not pursue the death penalty at the request of Shanann's family, who stated that they did not wish for any further deaths and supported Chris's decision to accept the plea agreement. On November 19th, he was sentenced to 5 life terms, 3 to be served consecutively and 2 concurrently, without the possibility of parole. He received an additional 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy and 36 years for 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. On December 3rd, 2018, Chris was transferred to an out-of-state facility due to security concerns. 2 days later, on December 5th, he arrived at Dodge Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Walpun, Wisconsin, where he continues to serve his life sentence. As of 2026, Chris Watts remains in prison in the United States. After pleading guilty in 2018, he was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at the Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, where he was transferred for security reasons following the case. Over the years, the case has continued to receive widespread attention through documentaries, interviews, and ongoing public discussion. Despite the time that has passed, the case remains one of the most shocking family crime cases in recent history. This is a case that continues to shock people not just because of what happened, but because of how normal everything appeared from the outside. To many people, they looked like the perfect family, a loving home, young children, and a future ahead of them. But behind closed doors, something very different was unfolding. And perhaps that's what makes this case so unsettling. The idea that sometimes the darkest truths can be hidden behind the most ordinary lives. And if there's a case you'd like me to cover next, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching Into the Night Stories. And as always, stay safe out there.